Hi. Robin, the Ass, and Danny23 by Matthew Schickele. In the dressing room after the show, Robin kept her arms crossed and her eyes down. She edged closer to the fake plant, patiently waiting for the band to finish breaking up. The argument was winding down as the two stars slipped out of their skin-tight purple costumes. The lead singer, the pop bot called The Ass, kept its voice calm as it methodically opened the 49 silver zippers laddering its side. "If you'll let me, Danny23, I can help ease this transition for you. I have a lot of contacts." "Whatever." Danny waved his hands in the air and tore off his wig. Glitter drizzled to the floor. Robin took out her tablet and brought up the financials. Part of her job was to anticipate. The topic of money was, inevitably, next. Danny was in his street clothes in record time. He pulled on his display jacket, did a little spin, and whined in a voice that tried but failed to be threatening. "Ass, I'm not leaving until I got my cut." It answered, "Certainly, Danny23, and turning its beautiful face to Robin, "Can you transfer the balance?" "Yep." She swiped towards the pop bot. It froze briefly as it opened internal connections to the relevant accounts, its own, Danny's, and the corporate owner of the band brand, The Ass and Danny. The young dancer glanced at his jacket's sleeve screen and nodded once. Right. As he left the room, he didn't look at his ex-partner or the casino's artist liaison. Later. The door slammed. In the sudden quiet, Robin noticed she was the only one still breathing in the small room. The Ass was naked now, checking its sculpted comic book androgyny in the mirror for dirt or scrapes. It did this after every show, before locking up in the security closet for the night. Robin. "Yes, the Ass?" It raised an arm and examined its torso as they spoke. "I start my new solo gig in a few days. I could use a hand getting settled. It will take an hour. I'll pay 50. Sure, why not?" In the dressing room a few hours earlier, Danny had waved a hand at Robin like she was a persistent fly. "It's in the rider, now go get it." She stepped into the hallway, closed the door, and shook her head. No way a creche cake was in the rider. The Ass and Danny's rider was famously short, one of the shortest in the industry. Something like 3 CZ Yum liquid battery refills and hummus. The energy was for the Ass, and the dip was for Danny. He just wanted her out of the room, Robin figured, because they were arguing. The Mormon Row Casino was huge, a small indoor city, really. Around-the-clock performances were booked in 14 different venues, including the enormous main auditorium, which seated thousands. The Ass and Danny weren't playing the enormous main auditorium. They were in the Glam Bar, a retro drinking hole decked out in the celebration of glam through the ages. Glam pop, glam rock, and glam twee. It seated 200, but rarely saw half that many. There hadn't been more than 50 people at any of the Ass and Danny's shows during their month run. Tonight was the last concert. Robin only heard a bit of the argument, but got the feeling Danny was on the way out. Maybe the Ass calculated it was time to ditch Danny23 for Danny24. Being Danny was a tough gig, but he must have known what he was signing up for. It had been some 60 years since the string of hits that made The Ass and the original Danny famous. And there was never any question, on stage or off, who the real star was. Danny sang harmony and danced, while The Ass was the lead singer, alluring, magnetic, ageless, as well as the business manager. Also, as a pop bot, even just a first-generation pop bot, it could work almost non-stop. No Danny ever lasted long. There wasn't a creche cake anywhere near the glam bar, so Robin had to walk through the Buffalo Room, past all the beeping, dinging betting machines, to try her luck at the Howdy store. She deftly skipped over each blinking plastic cow pie, tuning them out as they egged on the gamblers in their ridiculous cowboy drawl. Toby was working the store checkout. His eyes were unfocused, lids drooping. Robin had to poke him to earn a startled greeting. The casino grunts had a name for this common affliction: the glaze. Toward the end of a floor shift, you became anesthetized by the flashing lights, the constant stabbing machine noises, the endless sea of strangers. And all the while, you were paid close to cow pies. Musicians didn't have it much better than the floor jocks. Every act was under contract to a corporation. A talent like The Ass did all the work, booking, promoting, performing. Then they could only watch while all the soda but the bubbles got sucked up by whichever company owned the brand that year or month. Musician or floor jock, the world was filled with mechanisms designed to send the money up. Pop bot or person, you worked for the invisible wealthy. Robin realized she was holding the creche cake a little too tightly. She massaged the edges as she walked back, trying to reshape the little scene to factory fresh detail. From outside the door, it didn't sound like Danny was yelling anymore. She knocked twice and walked in. The rectangular room was walled with mirror, and a dressing counter ran the length of one side. It smelled like hairspray. The Ass was sitting, as always, in its heavily cushioned chair, barely moving, expression blank. Danny leaned on the wall a few feet away. He was upset, but controlled. They were both in their outrageous purple costumes, orange lightning bolts glittering diagonally. And they were so beautiful. Danny was 19 and elegant, his single blonde ponytail falling forward over his left cheek in that retro glam style. The Ass was extremely tall and thin, its face and body sculpted with a striking, generic, youthful glow. It was a physical magnet for the human gaze, and, like birds to window cats, its curves and movements could fascinate for hours on end. Since it wasn't yet in performance mode, its skin was a default beige, but even sporting the backstage-only bald head, the famous blizzard wig was on the counter. The overall effect was still radiant. This was someone designed to kindle desire. Ass, he sounds like a collector. Danny always spoke too quickly, like his mouth was a little faster than his mind. You supposed to stay away from them, right? He is a collector. He hasn't hid that fact from me. Danny threw his hands up. Scoob it out, Ass. It's probably a trap. I mean... He began waving his arms, trying to say in movement what he couldn't in words. This went on for a surprisingly long time. Finally, the Ass interrupted the dance. Look, Danny, I've been doing this since before you were born. Danny rolled his eyes but didn't say anything. I know a good gig. This is a good gig. Accustomed to trudging onward to get her job done, uncomfortable situations be damned, Robin took this moment to hand the crush cake to Danny. He mumbled thanks, ripped it open with his teeth, and took a huge bite. He started pacing. Have you ever done a show without a Danny? Yes, 37 of them. Solo shows between Danny and Danny 2, Danny 7 and Danny 8, Danny 9. Okay. Danny23 waved his arms again. He kept them in motion, even as he did a little spin on one foot and sat down. The ass shook its head a single time. You know better than to look to me for emotional or career reassurance. That this day would come was not only inevitable, you also agreed to it contractually. If you would like, I can put you in touch with Danny 16. He organizes the monthly Danny dinner. I believe Danny's 4, 7, 12 through 16, 18. Yeah, I get it. Understand, though the details are complicated, my approach to booking can be described as perform to the largest possible audience for the largest sum of money. The ass's left hand turned slightly, one of the apparently random gestures that only rarely flavored its conversation. Crowds have been steadily decreasing, and the duration of this new run is open-ended, very attractive to a pop-bot. That the gig doesn't include you is unfortunate, but, Danny said quietly, Okay, shush already, and resumed chewing his crush cake. It was time for Robin to break her silence. There was still a show to do. She took a deep breath, then released 2 words in a subdued, professional tone. 5 minutes. Danny cursed, crushed the cake wrapper, and threw it on the floor. He quickly checked his hair and makeup and was out the door. Robin could only hope he was heading to the stage rather than a bar or a junk den or wherever angry half-celebrities go. The ass rose gracefully from the cushioned chair and turned to the mirror. The transformation from manager to performer always began with the donning of the blizzard wig. Then, after a subtle change in posture, the pop-bot seemed to go a little out of focus as skin-deep waves rippled throughout its body. Robin always enjoyed watching the ass's ass warm up. Framed by the large circular window cut in the back of the costume, it started with the cheeks. They gyrated smoothly, independently, bobbing like the heads of owls searching for prey. Then the skin tone changed, gently shifting to light brown, to sky blue, to deep black, on and on through a spectrum both fantastic and familiar. Even without music, it was hypnotizing. And once a beat was flowing, the cheek choreography would follow along in rhythm, the whole rear expanding or contracting to best convey each song's mood. It was never just one ass. It varied in color, size, and shape, and by the end of the concert, the audience had experienced an all-but tour of the world and their imaginations. After nearly 100 shows, Robin still found it fascinating. It wasn't sexy exactly, more mesmerizing, like watching the Northern Lights, but concentrated in someone's rear end. And that is why, more than the catchy glam tunes, the ass was famous. Full outfit in place, the pop-bot drank a bottle of CZ Yum and activated the final touch. Hundreds of tiny glowing lights hovering around its body like fireflies, all in different colors. Some circled its limbs with quick spirals, others orbited its entire body. It was old tech, but it was pretty and still quite effective. As the ass left the room, it turned to Robin. It was in full performance mode now, smoldering with eroticism, the spinning firefly satellites softly illuminating its big hair and painted face. Robin, do you ever freelance outside the casino? Sure, yeah. What do you got? I'll speak to you after the show. Its voice was juiced with effects for singing, when I'm a manager again. The address was in a fancy neighborhood, and it was a home, not a performance venue, like Robin was expecting. She thought she was in the wrong place until she saw the two lifters carrying the Pop Butts cushioned chair inside. She followed them through a spotless, slate-tiled entrance hall to a door at the back. There was no doubt this was a collector's showroom. Wider than it was deep, tall ceilings, windows shuttered. Track lighting above washed away every shadow, and on black velvet bleachers along 3 walls, at least 100 bots were on display, arranged by decade. There were several classic models of kitchen bots and house cleaners, dental and medical assistants, and a lot of retail mall bots. There was at least one traffic cop. It was an extraordinary collection, priceless, likely. The ass was in the center of the room, dressed in standard business attire and speaking with a middle-aged man all in yellow. They glanced at the lifters and noticed Robin at the doorway. Welcome. It was obvious the ass was in manager mode. This is Courant. We are about to sign a contract. Robin, now off the casino's clock, didn't bother with her artist liaison demeanor. Hi, okay, so why am I here exactly? Witness. I always prefer a human witness at contract signings. And that's where your age shows, she thought. Not on your face, but in your business. 50 years ago, there was still contention about the legal standing of bots, whether their mark was valid, or if they could testify in the event of a lawsuit. The ass was taking precautions against problems that hadn't existed for decades. Its body appeared fresh and youthful, and always would, but its mind, its code, was elderly. All right, ass. The Popbot and the collector continued discussing their terms. Robin only vaguely listened, finding the surrounding museum of artificial intelligence far more interesting. She was delighted to see a gag vac, a famously failed line of room cleaner bots that doubled as your stand-up comic roommate. She'd seen old clips. They were atrocious. Then something clicked in her head. Turning back to the conversation, she interrupted. Hey, all these bots are off. The ass, are you really going to put yourself on a shelf and power down? That doesn't seem right, does it? Courant chuckled and said with a deadpan smile, She thinks I am a monster. How adorable. Look, he held up a hand. Your concern is admirable and naive. Why don't you two talk for a sec? He retreated to a corner of the room and busied himself with his collection. Robin was a little annoyed. She lowered her voice. Ass, I'm sure you don't need me. Can we just finish up so I can get my 50 and go home? He's not very polite, said the ass. But what you said a moment ago, that's exactly why I wanted you here. This is not a standard deal, and you might see something I don't. It spread one hand over its chest and pointed at its head with the other. I am limited. The human manager who was the framework for my business persona died over 30 years ago, and almost all the gigs I've booked have been stadiums, hothouses, or casinos. Okay, so answer my question. This contract states that I will come and go as I please. I won't power down unless I need to. He has a workshop here for repairs, which is another benefit. He's paying you? Of course, not a lot, but since it includes room and energy, and the company that owns your contract is okay with that? He is purchasing the contract. I will work for him, not a company. It took Robin a moment to absorb what this meant. She tried to think if she had ever met anyone who didn't work for a corporation. She hadn't. Yesterday, she had heard that Danny23 moved back to where he grew up to teach at the neighborhood dance studio that gave him his start. But even that bit of gossip was peppered with references to the megacorp it belonged to. Do you realize how extraordinary this is? Nobody doesn't work for a corp... Not working for a corporation is like... It's like swimming in an ocean that fish have never pissed in. The popbot blinked. A gig is a gig. Right, but... Hey, don't you need to perform? I mean, don't you want to perform? The ass shifted just slightly. Oh, you don't understand. Of course I will perform daily to the largest audience I've had in years. Its head tilted to indicate the rows of bots. He has them all set to wake every night at 8 for the show. Robin caught herself grimacing, so she covered her face with her hand, which she realized might look even worse if the ass noticed such subtlety. Finally, she just stuffed her hands in her pockets. But they aren't really an audience, are they? Why not? She didn't have an immediate answer, at least not one that didn't sound kind of offensive spoken to a bot. There was a long pause, which Courant saved her from. Whether or not he had been listening, he suddenly piped up from the other side of the room. Naive Robin, why not join us tonight for the first performance? Bring a friend. We'll drink wine. Though the lights were static, the ass performed like it was awash in the most dazzling of prismatic fountains. At dramatic moments, it slid backwards, right up to the duct tape on the floor that represented the edge of the stage, and the famous ass cheeks would pulsate and iridesce, seemingly alive. The accompanying music was too quiet, so quiet you could hear shoe squeaks and the microphone cable dragging. And that voice, that old-fashioned but still stunning voice, high-pitched moans, indecipherable low-growled lyrics, was booming out of the speakward awkwardly loud. But the ass was on fire, giving its all. Robin, Toby, and Courant sat on cheap folding chairs in the middle of the room. Robin sipped her wine slowly. Toby had a glazed look. Courant grinned broadly throughout the entire show, even shedding a few tears during the slow numbers. But they didn't clap or whistle or yell. All the bots in the bleachers were powered up and faced the stage end of the room. None of them moved, except for the gag vac, which occasionally laughed at nothing in particular. It was hard to say if any of them were actually watching. Robin kept an eye on a few of the later models and thought she might have detected a slight change of gaze when the ass strode from one place to another. That would certainly count as paying attention, but she wasn't sure. And she wondered if it mattered. The ass was being the ass, letting loose, just like in the casino shows, just like in the stadium days. Maybe that was what mattered. Before the show, Courant, the bot connoisseur, told Robin a bit about the ass's pedigree. It wanted to perform, to be looked at. But the people who built the ass didn't design it to need specifics like applause or adoration or groupies, any of the countless perks of fame that human stars typically craved. I suppose, Courant said, they calculated, once the seed is paid for... He shrugged, then gestured toward the stage. So this works for everyone. And after I'm gone, my collection will go to the Scientorium. The ass, too, if it wants. These nightly performances are explicit in my agreement with the museum. They can continue, essentially, forever. Robin nodded and watched the pop-bot prance and yelp, absent any reaction from the audience. According to Courant, it only wanted feedback when rehearsing or recording. Opinions only mattered in the studio, and even then only from recognized artistic collaborators. Robin laughed at this. On paper, the ass sounds like the ideal artist, caring just about the music, That's the kind of focus human artists can only dream of. So why are the songs such crap? Courant did not find this funny. His face squished up like she had hit him with a moldy lemon. But then the next song began, Cloud Bow Rain Thund, his favorite, and he was beaming again. Robin was glad the awkward moment passed quickly. Her host's enthusiasm was honest, and really, she enjoyed the show more than she expected to. The ass raised a fist in the air and howled a high note, holding it through a slow pivot. Its gorgeous moneymaker was revealed one last time, rippling like the ocean. The orbiting fireflies joined in a bright, spinning, circular tush frame, and the music leaped to a final massive chord. Then, suddenly, the room was quiet again. The ass lowered its fist as the throbbing cheeks wound down. Robin clapped. Thanks.